Standing high in the favour of Tzeentch, gaunt summoners are the elite of all Tzeentchian sorcerers, shrouded by a maddening cloak of sorcerous deceits. Dreaded for their reality-twisting incantations, they filled skies with faces that spit multicoloured mutating fire, toppling kingdoms and scrying the twisted paths of the future for their overlord. The Ever-Chosen.
That was quite a dramatic introduction, wasn't it? Well, I've finally bit the bullet and started miniature painting. If you're anything like me, new hobbies come and go all the time. I can pick something up one week and throw it away the next. So how exactly is this any different? Imagine this scenario. You're a cam-up on The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross. You see this master teaching their craft day in, day out, subconsciously learning all you need to know to get started. And that is exactly what I was doing. But instead of scenic views and happy little trees, it's incomprehensible horrors. There have been people who worked in the industry that went independent and just weren't honest about their skill levels, and personally that bothers me. Not just because you're being insincere to your viewers, but also to the newcomers of the hobby. So just to be clear, I do have a background in miniatures, but I don't have much of a background in painting them or playing with them. Mostly because of time, and if you've done any arts and crafts, you know that these things take up every single second of your free time. The way I look at it was, when I was at university, I studied film production. One of my first lectures was how to use a camera, and I thought to myself, isn't this the place where people already know the standard things? And it turned out that most people knew the theory side of it, but not the actual basic practice. And that's me in this space. I've sat through years of working around miniatures, seeing incredible professional painters and processors all doing their jobs to such an incredible standard. And in all honesty, it's discouraging. It's kind of like if I just went and did a 100-meter sprint against an actual athlete, or anybody in shape to be fair. One of my pet peeves with some video tutorials is manufactured mistakes that are shoehorned in on every video. As a concept, it's a good method of showing the most common mistake to the broadest audience. I dislike it. It's disingenuous. I like mistakes to be organic. I like to see a true screw-up happen because the universe was going to make it happen, unlike my cutting mat. I know for a fact that Hobbycraft staff have been gang-stalking me for the past couple of months now, and they were absolutely the ones that made me drop my bottle of glue solely so that they could boost their own sales of cutting mats. So, hello, I am a relatively new hobbyist, but not completely new. I have a massive pile of shame, and I set myself up to make sure that I had everything before I actually started. So what sort of experience do I actually have with painting miniatures? Well, I painted a unprimed Balrog and also slapped together a pretty terrible unmade warband for Warcry. And as you can see, it's unprimed, I didn't thin my paints, and it just looks like shit. But everybody has to start somewhere. I've probably consumed more miniature content than your average hobbyist. Do I remember much of it? No, not really. Fast project turnarounds don't exactly allow for digestion of information. And I'm hoping this is painting a picture of exactly how I wasn't interested in the hobby, but just in case it isn't obvious, it was a job. But saying that, I've now softened up to the idea of enjoying miniatures, specifically painting them. I do really enjoy looking at painted single miniatures and dioramas. I want to do all the crazy stuff that I keep seeing people do. It's fascinating. It's definitely a hobby where you completely decide your creative limits. And that's what's hitting the spot for me. The crazy miniatures that I've discovered, like Andrew May Miniatures, who does Hieronymus Bosch style minis, and of course, Turnip 28. And this idea of me taking it from a job into an actual passion comes entirely from being surrounded by incredible people with unmatched levels of passion for the hobby. Now that I've found my freaks and my mutated and the heretics and the stinky and the mushrooms and the rats, I'm starting to understand it too. So just to clarify, this is not the very first time I'm putting my paintbrush to a miniature, but it's the first time I've truly got enjoyment out of this hobby, and it made me happy. These videos aren't going to be tutorials. They're a non-linear log, a diary, a retrospective, and a way for me to look back and see visually what it is I'm doing wrong, and how I could potentially improve. It is also being used as a method of public accountability, just to make sure that I don't throw this hobby away and that I continue to see how far I can push myself. I undercoated the miniature in Colourforge's matte black primer. I should have done a little bit more research first into the effects of the primer, as it would have given me a bit more of an understanding of the outcome of the paints I used. And as somebody who's inexperienced, picking a scheme adds its new challenges. Objectively, the best thing to do is follow box art. I'm not personally a huge fan of the box art. I don't think it's bad work. I just don't feel creatively inspired if I feel like I'm doing a paint by numbers. The Gaunt Summoner has always been a miniature that I've wanted to paint. For me, if I think about Tzeentch, I think about the summoners. All those eyes, the stretched skin, the obelisk heads. I grew up playing WoW, so this kind of gives me some Yogg Saron vibes. And, you know, just for my Warcraft homies out there, that Black Temple Warlock staff with the Fellhunter on the end, you know the one. Every single mog, all the time, needs to be. Correct paint consistency seems to be the hardest part of learning for me so far. Everybody says thin your paints without any true explanation. I did, however, find a great video by a guy called Brushstroke, which goes into a lot of detail in the science about thinning your paints. But even with that knowledge, without the practical experience, as you can see in this video, my paints are just all over the place, from being way too thin to just way too thick. But I guess acknowledging that fact is progress, so that's good. One benefit I've found so far from editing my own painting video is it's actually great for constant self-scrutiny. I've been able to pick up on a lot more that I just simply wouldn't remember. And in a way, it's been a bit of a driving force to ensure that I learn more. Of course, I've already stated that this is a non-linear video. However, one of the things that's happened during the recording of this is that a couple of the clips got corrupted. So there are some steps in this that you just simply aren't going to see because the footage just doesn't exist anymore. Although I'm not a big fan of standard schemes, I figured it'd be best if I went with a relatively standard one for this Gaunt Summoner, with a couple of twists of course. The blue base paint for the robes was initially thinned way too much, with its consistency being more akin to a shade, but once I adjusted it, it started to flow much better and came out with a much smoother finish. I added Agrak's Earthshade to the recesses, spreading it further to give it a bit more of a subtle darkening across the robe as well. And it was at that time where I had actually started to regret not doing this as a sub-assembly. The miniature I'm currently filming, I am doing as a sub-assembly because I don't think I could have got to some of the parts otherwise. If I'd done this Gaunt Summoner that way, it would have saved me a lot of time with the twisting and turning, and to be quite frank, it started to feel like I'd gotten lost in Big Bird's labyrinth. Rather than having to constantly be cleaning up some of the more awkward mistakes just because of the positioning, I feel like I could have saved myself a lot of frustration if I had just done the sub-assembly. And I know there are a few people who will look down on sub-assemblies, but I think if you've got a very detailed, heavy miniature, it can just be a lot more comfortable for you to paint it in bits. Speaking of detailed heavy miniatures, one thing that I've noticed is that I actually missed a couple of bits of plastic when doing the cleanup. This model in particular, I don't feel like it stands out too much. It probably does to those with a more keen eye. There are of course some miniatures where you might overestimate your cut and then you've noticed that you've just snipped off the 15th nipple of a Slaneshi anteater. I'm quite happy with the blue gradient on the robe. I blended it more with some dry brushing, making sure that I kept the top dark. My highlight on the robe was probably my biggest mistake. It was the wrong angle, too much paint, too much pressure. I didn't really want to change this mistake because I wanted to see how I could evolve around it. And I did want the robes to look a bit weathered. I feel like the robes took on quite a nice icy feel to them, and the one part of the robe I'd been really looking forward to is the feathers. I'd wanted to try blending two contrast colours together, a blue at the top and a green at the bottom that was going to meet in the middle. It achieved quite a nice look to it, which I ended up adding more depth by doing some edge highlighting. The feathers were probably the best edge highlight I've actually done. I still messed it up, but I was told once that you can like rub it off, which sounds so silly when reading it back. But obviously it didn't work. I've seen it work in the past, but I think maybe the paint was too dry. After laying down a white base coat on the pages, I wanted to give it a more Tzeentchian and magical sort of vibe to it. So I added several different colours thinned down to the pages to just sort of stain it. And I'm quite happy with the outcome of it actually. This is the sort of experimentation I like doing, going through the chaos for whatever happens. For whatever reason, I decided to do a light green over the brown on the staff handle. I don't really know why I did it. This is just one of those things that I'm all over the place with, and I do believe that it affected the final quality of the miniature. As you'll see later on, most of the wooden bits on the staff I'd just completely changed, and it's one of the parts of the miniature I'm just not really that happy with. But one part I am happy with is the base. Now, this is one of my favourite parts. I love looking at people's bases. I love basing myself. I've done lots of little practice bases. I like using the cracked nail effect thing. I can't remember what it is. I do it in this video, but I can't remember the name of the paint. It's just a part of the little details I enjoy in painting, especially when it ties together scenery and dioramas. My miniature was blue tacked whilst I painted it. The problem with this was, it was just so difficult to get the blue tack off afterwards. And in fact, I think there's still some there underneath the glue. But for the base, I etched around the little bits of rock and stone. But most importantly, I just didn't want to end up putting paint over the bits where I was going to be putting the rocks. I made a little plan by etching around the rocks and then just taking it off and then putting the blue tack over, preventing it from getting any paints in between the base and the material. I like colourful and inventive bases, and I wanted to push some boundaries here. So whilst blending, I was thinking about, petrol on the road, on like a wet road, and it's got that little like glistening shine. I don't feel like that's what this has come out as. When it was wet, it looked a little bit more like it, but when it dried, it certainly took on a bit more of a muted feel. But again, this is just pure experimentation. As you can see from this as well, I quite like using natural materials. Finding that perfect rock or stone is weirdly a nice feeling. If you think about it, it's spent millions of years just existing to unfortunately become a part of this miniature. Overall, I think it looks pretty great. Again, I don't think I'll ever use blue tack again for it, as it was an absolute pain to get off. After supergluing the stones on, I used some fluorescent green followed by a heavy dry brush. I feel like the transition of the two colours as it edges further away from the lava gives it a bit more of a nice two-tone look. I know some people do say you should be priming natural basing material as well, but personally I feel like there's no reason to. I simply wanted to utilise the colours that nature had given me. And after that was done, I did a small dry brush on the summoner itself using the same pink as I did on the rock. And this means it's time for the eyes. I've always been a bit worried about doing eyes. It's always been one of the things that a lot of people that I've worked with have had problems with, even now when they've been painting for like 20 odd years. I felt like these ones, I think they've come out okay. I don't feel like it was a horrible process. It was nice. They look okay. There are some parts that I would definitely have changed. And I opted for a rather light blue to go over the white. This is to allow the eyes to stand out a lot more from its relatively darker face. And I also added some kind of inconsistent looking pupils with the same pink that I dry brushed things with. I do think overall, they're a solid 4 out of 10, but I don't even mean that in a bad way, I guess. There's a lot obviously that I need to improve on this, especially in regards to my brush control. But in particular, I'm not a big fan of the eye on the staff. I think I've really messed that up a lot, but I also think it might be because it's a curved surface, so it's something that I'm just not used to at all. And with that, the Gaunt Summoner is secured to the base, and after a quick rim job and a little bit more cracking, we're done. Overall, I'm genuinely quite happy with the outcome of this dude. I like a lot of the miniature, I've loved this process, and watching it back I feel like has been invaluable. I definitely need to explore the idea that less can be more. There are certain parts like the face where I probably could have skipped out on that extra shade or that extra colour, especially at the very beginning. I feel like that face looked really nice, and if I just left it like that, I think the overall miniature would have come out much better. But of course, this is all a part of learning, and I'll start to recognise my own progress when I preemptively think, no, don't do that, because that'll just ruin it. But this is just something that will come with time, and that's fine. That's the whole point of this entire thing. Even though I've done videos before, I've done quite a few videos, it's not been on this topic and it's not been exposing myself as much as it is. This is a giant leap outside of my comfort zone, and I imagine it would be for anybody. I've only ever been around highly skilled painters, as I said as well, so my perception of what might be good as a lower skill level is kind of warped. And I'm sharing this process because if you're new yourself, it's scary out there. It genuinely is, because there's so much criticism. There's a lot of people who will tell you what is right and wrong with miniature painting. And I want to be able to show you the embarrassing bad bits. I want to be able to show you the bits other people don't want to. And ultimately, even if you do something bad, if you put out something that is not to a standard, it's still progress. It's still doing something. And ultimately, the best thing about art is that it's subjective. I enjoy seeing people's creative evolution. If you want to pick up something, no matter what medium it is, if you want to pick something up and create something, please do. Share it. Share it everywhere. And you never know, because sharing your bad might end up coming out with something good. You might get some invaluable advice from somebody who has been down that route for years, or you might even get that valuable advice from a newcomer. You shouldn't discredit somebody just because of their experience. You never know what a fresh perspective might bring. So, go out there, create, share with people, get whatever help and knowledge you need. The wealth of information out there is insane. Make mistakes, show them, be proud of them. Because when you go back to do that again, you might make the same mistake, but it's going to be different. This has been my first painted miniature, and it's not only reignited a desire in me to be truly creatively driven, but also to be a part of a creative community. Thank you for watching this, especially if you've watched all this way, because it's a lot of ramble. I can't wait to truly get stuck into this journey.